Good morning once again, everyone. It is an incredible honor this morning for me to present someone that has become a giant for his unique contributions, not just in the field of theory of constraints, but in the wider fields of operations management and project management. He has a very long journey that brought him here today, and you can read that through his bio. The thing that most epitomizes Mr. Sanjeev Gupta to me is a beautiful quote from the French physicist Jean-Baptiste Perrin. He said that the aim of all science should be to substitute visible complexity for invisible simplicity. If you think about E equal to mc squared, the famous contribution of Einstein, it is beautifully simple. And it describes an enormous amount of visible complexity in the universe. In the fields of operations management and project management, there's a huge amount of visible complexity when you walk into these environments. And it's extremely easy for those that have experience to be completely overwhelmed by the visible complexity. It takes incredible courage and confidence to overcome your self-doubt, to believe that there must be inherent simplicity there somewhere, to look for the one thing that can change everything. But it's also important to do it with an incredible amount of humbleness, because as a leader, whether you are a leader in the form of a CEO or business owner, or a leader in the form of a consultant, an advisor, a coach, you also have to respect the people that have been stuck in that visible complexity for a tremendous amount of time. If you don't do it with incredible humbleness, you will lose them. And that is what epitomizes Sanjeev to me. It's this incredible balance of humble confidence. It's incredible honor again to introduce Sanjeev and to listen to his very exciting story today about how do you go into an environment that you have very little intuition, where there's a tremendous amount of pressure and urgency and stress and anxiety, and lead with this humble confidence. Thank you so much, Sanjeev, for sharing your inspirational story.
So, I don't know how the conference has been for you so far, but good. Yeah? So, for me, it has been very inspiring. So, I'm inspired, as I say, all over once again. Because yesterday's presentations, the things that I heard, Wise Tech, right? Not only have they solved a problem, but they have figured out how to embed that into their culture. Right? And every company's journey is going to be somewhat different in terms of what you do to embed a certain way of doing things into your culture, but they have done it. Right? So they have shown how to do it. Then I sat through 3 presentations on healthcare. Right? So it's incredible to me that people, the goal, by many people, they say the goal is like the Bible of manufacturing. Yes? Why is it the Bible? My answer, just like the people read the Bible and don't do anything with it, there are many people who read the goal and don't do anything with it. Right? You could be from a factory. You could be from a manufacturing environment, and you will read the goal and you will say, you know what? But my environment is more complex. I have multiple bottlenecks. Right? And they'll come up with all kinds of reasons as to why this will not work. In fact, Eli Schragenheim is here. He had designed a set of simulators for production, right? And there was, I think, a green machine in there. So Eli Goldratt used to say, this is the green machine with a dent problem, which is no matter how much I can convince people about the basic principles, this person will say, you know what, I have a green machine, but my green machine has a dent in it. Right? That is the kind of objection you will hear. At the same time, you will have people the first conference I remember I attended, I'm not a conference. This was by Goldratt Institute. They had organized the Jonah conference in UK. I think it was 1995 or something. Right? First person I met was from a bank. Second person I met was from a software company. I'm like, why are you here? Right? So they had read the goal and applied it to their environment. Right? So the point is that there is what Alan is saying. There is something in the gut that people feel is very simple about even a complex operation. And somehow in their gut, people see that the goal describes their reality and they will be able to take it and convert it. There are many other people who, no matter how much you teach them, they will never do it. So I'll give you an example. So I'm so this company already uses our software, this organization, but they have not implemented the principles. So of course, they're not going to get the results. So I'm having a meeting with the top people, and they're like, but give me examples from maintenance and repair. Like, okay, these are all the examples from maintenance and repair. But give me examples from ship maintenance and repair. So I give them examples from ship maintenance and repair. But give me examples of submarine maintenance and repair. I'm like, I don't have those. Right? Give me examples where we do aircraft carriers and submarines at the same time. I'm like, you know what? You are really a unique organization. I don't have any examples from your organization. So the question is, what prompts us to take action? And once we are prompted to take action, how do we go about implementing it? So my solution is, first I will ask you a question. Alex Rogo, do you remember how many days it had to turn the plant around, the factory around?
3 months.
3 months, right? When I went to Vulcan, the mine I ran last year, 16,000 people, we were making a loss of $12 million in the first month, right? Doesn't matter how we got there, but we are making a loss of $12 million in the first month. So after about 15 days, when I had figured out what to do, I had never seen a mine before, by the way. I had never seen a mine before. After 3 months, after we had done the turnaround, I was asking people going into the mine, is that a dozer? They said, no, that is a grader. Right? So I did not know, even after doing the implementation, what the different pieces of equipment in the mine were. So anyway, so the question I would ask people is, hey, we lost $11 million last month, and if we keep doing the same thing, next month we will lose $50 million. How much time do you think we have before the shareholders say we need to shut this down? What was their answer? 3 months. And we did the turnaround in 3 months. Right? There are many examples here. So I started recently a series of interviews. So the first interview I did was with an emergency department doctor. Right? Guess how long did it take for him to do the turnaround? To go from being the worst emergency department to being the best emergency department in their region. 90 days. Right? So it is possible. How many of you have implemented some version of TOC in your organization? How long did it take you to get results? 90 days. 90 days, if that much. Right? 90 days is just to prove that the results you got were not a fluke, that you could get them repeatedly for many weeks. Actually, you get the results in the first 3 weeks. Is that fair? At the same time, how many people struggle to even get the implementation started? All of us. I think all of us. Right? So there is some paradox here, and I want to explore this together with you as to why this, but let me just keep sharing. 90-day turnaround, right? But turnaround, what I mean is you have increased the flow rate or throughput or operationally free cash code, right? However you want to measure it. There's a difference though. So I'm just, in making this claim about turnaround, I differentiate between turnaround and transformation. Right? Transformation is what Vice Tech has achieved. Right? Creating a culture that sustains this turnaround, even as you grow, even as you acquire other companies. That is transformation. Right? But turnarounds can happen within 90 days. Transformations take time. I think the first mistake you can make is thinking about transformation when you actually need to be doing a turnaround. Like, don't think about sustainment. Don't think about training people. Don't think about software. Don't think about process. Don't fall into that trap. Why? This is my approach. Right? Don't start with a process. Fix the flow, get the results, then leave a process behind, because you don't even know what the process would be when you are in a chaotic environment. You probably don't even know where the constraint is until you fix the flow. But once you have fixed the flow, you know what works, you know where the constraints are, and you can leave a process behind. Right? In fact, do not even think about software until you have fixed the flow. You will get caught in a software implementation and you will not achieve flow. This is what I believe. And of course, I'm going to just share my sets of beliefs with you, but and then I want you to challenge me, right? But I think the point that is getting missed out is Ellie showed us the direction. He gave us the keys. It's all there in the goal. If you want to learn anything about TOC, everything about TOC is in the goal. Everything is there. You don't need extra knowledge if you want to implement it. But you are fortunate. To use a different metaphor, Ellie showed us where the mountain top is. There are many other people before you who have carved multiple paths to get to the top of the mountain. Right? The trick is not to overthink. Pick a path. So I hate thinking processes, but if you love thinking processes, use thinking process. But don't think too much, don't try to get too much knowledge. Pick a path, stick to it, and you will get there. You have to pick a path and stick to it. If your paradigm is 5 focusing steps, keep thinking how to improve flow using the 5 focusing steps. Absolutely fine. If your paradigm is to fix the flow, you have to choke the release, keep thinking about that. If you think you have to understand the core conflict, do that. Right? But don't get trapped by trying to learn too much. Too much knowledge will make you dumb. This is my belief. Right? I could be totally wrong. I truly believe in this Ernest Hemingway quote. The shortest answer is doing the thing. Right? To say it differently, a lot of things in life I don't think can be taught. They can only be learned. And until you do it, you will not learn it. You have to do flow to understand flow. You have to do it. Right? You can attend many conferences. You can read many books. But until you do it, you will not understand it. right? So when I was in Africa last year, so I went to Mount Kilimanjaro. I just knew that there are enough people who have done it. There are guides who will take you there, right? I did not do any preparation. I managed to reach there, right? I could have just thought and thought and thought about it and never taken the step. When I started, I read the goal, right? I read the goal. I had never worked inside a factory. I was in manufacturing headquarters. I was in the headquarters. I read the goal. I took a job in the worst performing factory in that company because this was the company that used to supply printed circuit board assemblies for all the fax machines and copiers and printers that rest of Xerox used to make. And I was just a junior manager in that plant. I was a production planning manager, right? I arrived there in May. By August, we had become the best performing plant in Xerox. And what did I do? I did not get trapped in complexity. I just believed that somehow the principles of the goal would work. I went to the shop floor. I started looking for Herbie. I could not find Herbie. I could not find Herbie because there was inventory everywhere, right? Because that is the technique that is there in the goal, right? You look where the biggest inventory is, that is your bottleneck. But I could not find Herbie because there was inventory everywhere. So I called the shop floor supervisors and I said, you are complaining about the schedules, that the schedules you are given are not possible. Tell me, what kind of a schedule do you want to give me? First to give you. You will not believe it. One supervisor gets up and says, you know what? Don't worry about the scheduling the entire factory. We have this machine called DDAR machine, which inserts the components onto the circuit board. This machine is our constraint. And give me the schedule for that machine and I will manage the rest. This is coming from people who had not read the goal. Right? Then the second question I asked was, okay, that is fine. But what about the machines before the machine? They said, you know what? Just give us 3 days and we will figure out. So create a schedule for that machine, give us 3 days before that, and we will figure out the rest. I said, but okay, I give you the constraint schedule, but how should I promise the date to the customer? Another person said, same 3 days. Add 3 days to the constraint schedule, and that is the due date we should promise to the customer. I did not have to teach them anything. I did not even have to give them the goal. The idea is so simple. Then, 2 weeks later, one supervisor, I still remember her name, Selsa, she comes to me and she goes, I did something without the approval of the plant manager. Can you please go and get that approval for me? I'm like, what did you do? She goes, on this machine, we run this machine 2 shifts, but we had only one operator who was trained in operating this machine on each shift. So I trained 2 extra operators for this machine. I did not tell them anything. Right? The point is, actually the world is this simple. The world is this simple. I think we make it complex. If we just go and talk to people, sometimes they will give us the solution. Right? Trying to get buy-in is a trap. Is a trap that will lead you to complexity. Buy-in, same thing. Have you ever tried getting buy-in of your children? How many of you have children? Have you tried getting their buy-in? And every time you try to get buy-in, they think you are trapping them. That you can ask questions, you can do this, you can do that, right? So you cannot get buy-in. You cannot get buy-in. This is my belief. You can challenge it. This is my belief. Right? I think people have to realize. People have to realize. They have to come up with their own solutions. And I'm not telling you anything new. I think Ellie already wrote it in this book called, What is this thing called the Theory of Constraints? And he said, it has to be the emotion of the inventor. You have to let the people invent the solution. Right? And I still believe that. I still believe that. So anyway, I think the only thing I can tell you is results will, so I don't know how many of you know about the story of the mine, when I did the turnaround. How many of you know about it? Okay, so enough people know about it. I'll just recap for the other people. So this mine, 16,000 people, Africa's largest coal mine. I had never seen a mine before. I go there, half of our trucks are down because cost accountant has said tires are too expensive. So we did not have tires, so the trucks were down. Right? Because, so we did not have tires. Our trains were failing because we had not done maintenance in them. Our wash plant was giving us a yield of 11% when it's supposed to give us a yield of 17%. All these problems are there, and I did not know anything about the mine. In 90 days, our yield was 17%. Our production from the mine went up from 2 million tons to 3 million tons. And our trains started running in 60 hours instead of 100 hours. Right? The point is, even in such a complex environment, thinking about the flow, knowing the goal, that's all I needed. That's all I needed. And I just had to ask the people, right? The tires problem was obvious. The trucks were failing. So that constraint was obvious. The trains constraint, I just had to ask people, where is the constraint in the trains? And they knew. I asked the wash plant person, what is the way to increase the yield? He says, if you have a stable flow from the mine into the wash plant, the yield will improve, because every time we have to interrupt the batch, then we have to reset the wash plant, and every time we have to reset, it takes time to do the resetting, and we suffer the yield. So if we run only a 2-day batch, when our setup time is 1 day, we're not going to get good yield. We have to set it up and let it run for some time. So all we had to fix was the flow from the mine and the flow in the trains, and everything improved. That's all we had to do. Right? Moving forward, we increased the mining production. In May, I went to South Africa to celebrate Cape Town, and I'm sitting on top of the Table Mountain. I get a phone call saying the prices of coal are going to drop. They've started dropping, and they're going to drop by 40%. So we had to increase it again, and we increased it again. The complexity trap that I avoided falling into was we had to increase the wash plant uptime. So some consultant came, he said he knew TOC, so he came up with a list of 150 equipment in the wash plant where they wanted us to improve the reliability to 99%. Right? And to improve that reliability would have taken forever. And in a wash plant, you have 300 pieces of equipment in a line, series, and you have 8 such lines. So even if everything is working at 99% in a series, what is the reliability of the overall line? Right? So improving the reliability will not work. The solution was very simple. Solution was, just like in a car, you don't keep changing the gears of the car. If you keep changing the gears of the car, what happens to the car? It starts becoming unreliable. Right? All we had to do was feed at a consistent rate, and the wash plant uptime went up. Flow is very powerful. Flow, I think we probably underestimate the impact of flow on many things. Like, it's not just about the flow increases your throughput, it also increases the reliability, in this case, in a process plant. And flow makes the people's lives less stressful, for sure. Right? So, I think Ellie already told us that the objective is to improve flow. Don't get distracted by any other thing. You want to improve the performance of your organization, improve the flow. How to improve the flow? The goal is there, read it, figure it out. If you cannot figure it out, many other people here. There are so many experienced people here. Bill is there, Dave is there, Alan is there, Oded is there. There are so many people who have already figured out. They have carved the path for you. Pick a path, follow it. You just have to pick a path and follow it. Right? If you get, so here is the thing, to Alan's question. Right? How do you overcome the complexity trap? The instinct is tackle complex with complex, right? There is so much complexity, right? But we know in our hearts that complex solutions will not work. Why? Why will complex solutions not work? Anyone? Yeah?
I would like to say they bring their own complexities by themselves, and then you get an oscillating system that is chaotic.
So that is one problem. I think other problem with complexity as a leader, the problem with complexity is how do you provide direction to your people? How do you get your people to follow a complex set of directions? Right? If you tell your people, we have to increase our output while reducing our cost and, right? Okay, you have already confused them. A truck driver who comes into the mine, should they focus about cost? Or should they focus about running the truck and transporting coal? A purchasing person, should they focus on making sure they get the best price for a component, for a wash plant? Or should they focus about getting it as soon as possible so that the plant can keep running? Right? As a leader, the problem with complexity is your people will get lost. That is the issue with complexity. So a leader's job has to be to distill simplicity from complexity. It has to be. It has to be. Until you have done that, whether it's the marketplace complex, in a startup, right? In a startup, what does a good entrepreneur do in a software startup? You have a breakthrough technology. It can be applied to many different areas. It can be applied to many different industries, right? What does a good leader do? They say, you know what? We can do all that, but this is the market we are going to serve. Right? Suddenly then, the direction for everyone in engineering, marketing, sales becomes clear. But if you don't provide that, so I'll run an experiment which Dr. Stephen Covey ran in one of the conferences that we had for our company. So I want you all to get up. Okay. Close your eyes. Close your eyes. And turn around, half a turn, one turn, whatever. Just turn around. And keep your eyes closed and point where you think the north is. Where is the north? Point your finger in the north direction. Open your eyes and see what everyone else is pointing to. right? This is the complexity trap. You are pointing people in too many directions. You're just pointing people in too many directions. Right? It's better to point people in the wrong direction, but in the same direction. At least you'll figure out that this path is wrong much faster. Right? So, in my mind, the question, I was fortunate at Vulcan. I learned two new concepts, great concepts. The one thing and cash score. Right? The one thing, how many of you have read the book, The One Thing? Okay, I would advise everyone to read it. The One Thing. Just like that. Right? And the focusing question that person gives is, doesn't matter whether you use clouds, doesn't matter whether you use cause and effect, whether you use 5 focusing steps, does not matter. You got to figure out what is the one thing that if you do it, everything else will become unnecessary. Right? It takes hard work. It is not easy. But you will find that one thing. That in the mind, it was a very, 24/7 job. But every Saturday, I would spend just a day thinking about 2 things. One is whether the one thing, the big one thing that I had decided on, was it still the one thing? Right? And I would spend a day thinking about it. And second is, within that one thing, big one thing, what was the small one thing that needed to be done to move that one thing forward? That is all I used to do. And on Saturday night, I would send out an email to all the people that reported to me, saying, this is my one thing, right? Figure out what is your one thing based on this. That's all. Right? So, to answer Alan's question, I think this is probably a very good question to ask. If you're dealing with complexity, that just have a belief that you will find the one thing and keep asking what is that one thing. Right? I cannot get more prescriptive than that. I will not tell you whether to use or not to use conflict diagrams. I will not tell you whether to use or not to use cause and effect, current reality. Use whatever you want to use. So this was one thing that one question I would ask myself to keep simplifying it. Right? When I went in, I had 3 choices. Cut costs, increase production, or do both. I had to pick out of these 3 one. Right? So obviously coming from my background and my training and my belief system, we chose to increase production. Right? And all I had to go and tell people was, we are not going to cut costs. We are not going to fire people, even though we are making a loss. All we want you to do is to increase production. They figured out the rest. Right? As we did the implementation and we succeeded, so we did the second implementation, again we succeeded. Then what we started finding was people would have requests for equipment, for people, for components, for money, whatever, right? And they would get stuck in purchasing and in finance and in HR. If you needed an extra employee, extra engineer, HR would become a bottleneck. If you if you needed some parts to be bought, procurement would become a bottleneck. If it was something expensive, finance would become a bottleneck. So I started this Bottleneck Busters Forum every week, right? One for the wash plant, one for the mine, one for the trains. And the thing was, anyone could come and ask me for anything and it would be approved right away. Right? So, first meeting, someone from the wash plant maintenance comes and says, I need a pickup truck, extra pickup truck, not the mining truck, a pickup truck for my engineers to drive around. Like, okay, why? Because it's too inconvenient for them to respond to calls and the truck is not always available. I said, okay, procurement person, get an extra truck, but here is my question for you. I'll give you the truck. How much more coal will you give me? Right? I had to do that calculation only once for that person. Next meeting, people would come to this Bottleneck Busters forum and they would come to me, not with a request. They would come to me and they would say, you know what? I can give you 100,000 tons of extra coal a month if you give me this. Right? The direction was clear. As long as you give me extra production, we don't mind spending the money. But you need to tell me how much more you will give me. Right? It was just this simple. Then we used to have this I started a daily production meeting. So I'm just talking about the one thing. Right? So you would go in and you would say, why did you not achieve yesterday's production plan? And again, the daily production meetings. There's like 50 million excuses every day. And there's a different excuse every day. After 3 meetings, I decided that it's not going to work. We're not going to devolve into a traditional manufacturing, traditional management environment. So I said, the only thing we are going to discuss in this meeting is if you miss production because of whatever we have decided our one thing is. So, for example, if our one thing is to increase the feed rate, right? If our production suffered because of feed rate, that is all I want to discuss. Other problems I don't want to discuss. Our only objective in the daily meetings is to eliminate feed rate as the reason for missing production. And once we have fixed that, we'll pick up the next one thing to fix. And the point being, one thing at a macro level works, one thing at a micro level also works. One thing in terms of where do you fix the flow, one thing also in terms of how do you continuously improve the flow. But once that one thing is clear, what happens? To make the feed rate happen, there has to be cooperation between the mine and the wash plant. Is the joint responsibility. But once it is clear that my focus as CEO is only the feed rate, people will figure out how to solve the problem. So this is the reason that I think simplicity is important. Without simplicity, you cannot synchronize a large organization. In Silicon Valley, you cannot even align 5 developers, right? Because every developer has 10 opinions. Right? So you need that simplicity of one thing. I think this was a new thing that I learned. Just persistently asking, what is the one thing? And the other thing I learned was cash core. I'll not go into the detailed explanation of cash core. All I can tell you is genius. Is genius using weekly cash core in a for-profit company it aligns very well with flow. It takes throughput, inventory, operating expense, and combines that into a one number. That is not a ratio, it is simple plus and minus. It is something that is tangible because it is cash in the bank. And it has an element of time because you're looking at how much cash core did you generate this week. So time is automatically factored into it. Right? So again, I'm not going to, you can talk to Ravi, Gilani, you can read the literature on it, but I think this is the only financial metric that makes sense to run a for-profit company. Cash core. Right? And it not only simplifies day-to-day management, It also simplifies decision making. I'll give you an example. So we had to buy loaders. Loaders are you have coal piled up, mountains of coal, and you have to lift the coal, put them onto the truck. That is a loader. So our feed rate was suffering because we did not have enough loaders, right, to load the coal into the truck that will then dump into the wash plant. We had two options. To buy a loader would cost us $9 million. To lease a loader for 3 years was $11 million. Right? Which one is a better decision? What is that? Because that's it. Right? So the purchasing guy says we should buy the loader. Right? But I said, what is the impact on the cash core? Suddenly the decision becomes clear. I would lose 6 months of cash core because I don't have the loader, because I'm buying it, versus leasing. So this is how, so cash core does a great job of incorporating time into your calculations. And so that's all I'll say about the cash core. I think it's a great simplifying tool for decision making. Flowgrams, right? So why this is important to me is after the first 3 months when we had done the turnaround and increased the production, like, okay, we need to increase production again. So before deciding, I said, let me also check some other ideas. Henning Dupre, he's done a lot of implementations of TOC in mining. So Henning says, it's impressive, Sanjeev, what you have done, but do you have flow? I said, what do you mean? Of course we have flow. This is what we have done. Look, we increased the production from 2 million to 3 million tons a month. He said, no. Send me your daily output graph. Right? So, this was the output graph. Before we arrived, we started the implementation when I arrived in February, it was 58%. This 58% is the ratio of average to the best. So ratio of average to the best. We had increased it to 68%. I said 68% is just average. Right? If you want to really have flow, you should be close to 80%. Right? So this told us that we still did not have flow, even after making all these improvements. So this flowgram is a new thing that I learned. So again, I'm telling you from a flow perspective. Right? How do you know if you have flow or not? In a hospital, you don't have to look at daily, you have to look at probably hour by hour or shift by shift discharge of patients. But plot what the output is, right, on that frequency and compare the average to the best. Based on this, I prohibited celebrating the best days. So we're not going to celebrate the best days. If you have a best day, that means you had a worst day also. Right? So again, this is I think is probably not out there in general literature, but this is a very useful concept to say what we want to improve is flow. So improve the ratio of average to best. And I found this to be true after kind of learning it from Henning, that an organization that has flow is operating at about 80%. Right? And that should be the goal, about 80%. Right? Inventory, I think we know the answer, right? Inventory turns is the answer, but you can do something similar for inventory. But I'll not go into those details. What else is there to cover? Yeah. Coming back to turnaround versus transformation, my personal belief, you can challenge me. My personal belief is that flow and throughput accounting is all you need to turn around. You don't need thinking processes, etc., for turning around. Yeah, if you want to embed the culture, you want, people don't have good tools for structured tools for thinking. You can adopt fishbone, cause and effect, whatever you want to adopt, fine. Right? But the turnaround is going to happen by improving the flow. And throughput accounting, because that is the right measurement, at a financial measurement of whether you are improving the flow or not. I'll tell you a little bit more about my history. So I did this implementation in Xerox after I left Xerox to start a software company to provide drum buffer rope software. Right? Because I had done the turnaround in 90 days, Alex Rogo had done it in 90 days. For me, 2 data points were enough. We set the goal for our company that we would implement and get results in 90 days. Right? And that is what would happen. Every time we would implement, we would walk away, and we used to give the software trial for 90 days. Say, in 90 days, if you don't have the results, you don't need to buy the software. Right? And we would get the results in 90 days, or we would not. Right? If we would not, fine. Take out our software, and probably the organization is never going to implement flow anyway, so why bother? Then we created this company. Long story short, we were growing, so we got venture capital to grow more, but instead of that, our sales went down. I got fired. Then I started another company, which was for critical chain project management. And I remember Ellie. So this was Don Novotny. He's a veteran of TOC. He was discussing with Ellie Goldratt. Sanjeev has a different idea of implementing critical chain, which is to choke the release instead of doing project by project if you have a multi-project environment. Ellie's recommendation was do it on one project, then do it on the second project, then do it on the third project. And Don Novotny said, Sanjeev is thinking differently. He first goes and chokes the release, and then they implement critical chain project management. Right? So, characteristically, first he said, Sanjeev is just, But then very quickly he said, it makes sense. It makes sense. And the point is that I believed that even if it was a project environment, I did not have to wait for 5 years, 3 years, 2 years to get an implementation and done and get the results. Right? It was just this belief that things had to be simpler and we could get results fast. So what is the one, I did not know the concept of one thing, but what was the way to get results fast? And that is what drove us to that choking the release of projects. So if flow rate is your constraint, market is not the constraint, product is not the constraint, you should be able to do turnarounds very fast. And I think you know enough that if you improve output by 20, 30%, your profits probably increase by 300-400%. You know that. I think this is the importance of leadership. In a traditional process improvement, where does change happen? At the top or at the bottom? Bottom. In a flow implementation, where does change happen? Here or here? It's a mindset change. It's a rules change. It's a policy change. Full kit is a policy change. Choking the release is a policy change. Right? The person who is doing the work, they don't care. They are happy that you are giving them a full kitted project. They are happy that they are not multitasking. And the project will get done faster. Right? So all of flow implementations, if you think change is happening here, you are thinking something wrong. When you are searching for the one thing, search for the one thing here, not here. Right? I think that will guide you in the right direction. If I have to implement a change that requires training 16,000 people, I am thinking complex. I have to make one change that I can make at my level and everyone else will follow. Right? In the mine, the only change we made, this was the only change, by the way, to increase production of the mine, the only change we made was traditionally a mine has a mine plan. Mine plan is something where you look at the mine, you look at the geology of the mine, and you say what is the best way to traverse the mine and mine something from it. Right? Because it's a three-dimensional thing. So you have to carve a path through the mine. That's a mine plan. Right? You take this mine plan, you give it to your salespeople to say, this is what we will be producing approximately, so go and sell. Salespeople go and sell. The customers don't buy according to the mine plan. They might buy according to what they want. Correct? And when you actually do the mining, the mine plan has some assumptions about what you will find, but the reality is going to be different. What happens in the mining industry is they take the mine plan and convert that into a production plan. The only change I made was said, mine plan is good for selling, but now we will take the sales orders and our production plan will be based on the sales orders. That's all we did. That's all we did. Right? But I had to keep searching for it. And it took me 3-4 days to figure it out. And why did that matter? Because suddenly, when you are producing to what the customer wants, you're not changing your trucks. Because if you are producing to a mine plan, but your customer wants something else, sooner or later, you're going to start disrupting your production plan. Make sense? And when you start disrupting your production plan, what happens to the utilization of your trucks, of your equipment, of synchronization? Goes down. Only change we made was go from production to a mine plan to make to order. That's the only change we made. By that change, not only did we increase the mining output, but we improved the stability of flow to the wash plant, so we improved the wash plant yield. And so, in terms of searching for the one thing, I think you have to search for that one thing, not that other people have to change. The one thing that you have to change at your level. I truly believe that most of the people here know how to do their jobs. And they know it better than you. Right? So, if you think your job as a CEO is to go and micromanage these people so that they can do a better job, you are in the wrong position. You have to believe that mining people know how to do mining. Wash plant people know how to run the wash plant. Maintenance people know how to do maintenance. It's something at your level that is causing them not to do a good job. You have to believe that. Otherwise, you will fall into the trap of complexity, micromanagement, over-control, over-planning, over-optimization. You will fall into all those traps. Final piece. I think this is true. And this kind of goes back to some people pick up the goal, and even if they're not from manufacturing, they will go and implement it and get results. Out of 1,000 people, 999 people will pick up the goal. Even if they are from manufacturing, they'll read the goal and they'll say, interesting book, I'm different. Right? What I find is, those people somehow belong in the cost world. Because cost world, complexity, micromanagement somehow go all together. Throughput world, simplicity, not micromanaging, somehow go together. I don't know why, but that is what I have seen. That's what I have observed. So this cost world will never understand TOC. But I think it's still our job to understand this world. Because this is the world we are dealing with. Even as the top management, when we hire people, a lot of people below us will be in this world. So we should not worry about getting this world to understand us. We should just worry about us understanding this world. Right? At least, you know thy enemy better than yourselves. Then you know where their motivations are. Right? So I have written down my experience from the mine in this memoir. It's not for publication, but it's not available publicly, but I have some copies printed. You can read it, photocopy it, return it to me, whatever you want to do. But it's not available for public distribution. But I am writing a novel, which is the story of Andile Manave, based on my experience and other people's experience from healthcare. So this is a combined story of turning around healthcare and mine. Right? So I'm working on that book. This one is written, this one is not written. It's half written yet. So I think with that I will end the presentation.